All right, well, welcome to part 9. This is going to be a very in-depth part, so grab your seatbelt, grab your popcorn. We've seen now that there's been a Pharisee conspiracy to attack Christ and to introduce their false messianic age with the changes to the scriptures, and also the other things that we looked at where they changed the Old Testament things having to do with Christ's prophecies and so on. We've seen historical evidence of how the alphabet has changed completely from what it used to be, where you have Paleo-Hebrew versus modern-day quote-unquote Hebrew. Now we're going to look at a lot of things in succession to show you that modern Hebrew is an engineered language. It's an engineered language for a very specific purpose, i.e. to be a magical alphabet. And of course to cast spells and do sorcery and do all kinds of divination. So this is Kabbalah Wikipedia. We're going to just read a couple of things, comment on them, and we're just going to go line item because there's a lot to look into. Some of these things you're probably familiar with a little bit, but it's worth a good review. Kabbalah is an esoteric method, discipline, and school of thought in Jewish mysticism. A traditional Kabbalist is called a Mekubal. The definition of the Kabbalah varies according to the tradition and aims of those who follow it. From its original origin in medieval Judaism to its later adaptations in Western esotericism, Christian Kabbalah, if there is such a thing, Hermetic Kabbalah, and so on. Jewish Kabbalah is a set of esoteric teachings meant to explain the relationship between the unchanging eternal God, the mysterious Ein Sof, which by the way is not the God of the Bible, this is their own counterfeit God, and the mortal finite universe, God's creation. It forms the foundation of mystical and religious interpretations within Judaism. Jewish Kabbalists originally developed their own transmission of sacred texts within the realm of Jewish tradition, and often use classical Jewish scriptures to explain and demonstrate its mystical teachings. These teachings are held by Kabbalists to define the inner meaning of both the Hebrew Bible and the traditional rabbinic literature and their formerly concealed transmitted dimension, as well as to explain the significance of Jewish religious observances. So they have their own interpretation of what the Word of God says, and of course it's very Antichrist. Historically, Kabbalah emerged from the earlier forms of Jewish mysticism in 12th to 13th century Spain and southern France, and was reinterpreted during the Jewish mystical Renaissance in the 16th century Ottoman Palestine. The Zohar, the foundational text of the Kabbalah, was composed in the late 13th century. Isaac Luria is considered the father of contemporary Kabbalah. Lurianic Kabbalah was popularized in the form of Hasidic Judaism from the 18th century onwards. During the 20th century, academic interest in Kabbalistic texts, led primarily by the Jewish historian Gershom Scholem, which we're going to get a quote from in just a second, has inspired the development of historical research on Kabbalah in the field of Judaic studies. So Kabbalah is very much an integral part of Judaism and the Jewish ideal. We're going to look at a quote from Gershom. Remember, he's a Jewish historian. And if I can find it, gosh, these things always change when you... Here it is. This is the Messianic idea according to Gershom Scholem. Quote, is totally different in Judaism than in Christianity. Judaism in all its forms and manifestations has always maintained a concept of redemption as an event which takes place publicly, on the stage of history, and within the community. In contrast, Christianity conceives of redemption as an event in the spiritual and unseen realm, an event which is reflected in the soul and the private world of each individual and in which affects an inner transformation which need not correspond to anything outside. Now, there is some truth to this, but he's also kind of twisting it a little bit too, because Christianity does have a physical redemption. That is the promise of the gospel. It's not just that, oh, I'm right with God. Well, if I can't live, then what's the point? The gospel is, you can't divorce the gospel from the future redemption of the earth, of your physical body, of a physical redemption, absolutely. But the point here is that Judaism has always been about the flesh. It's always been about, let me see it. Let me see. I got to see it. Like the apostles, when, before they got it, they were curious if Jesus is going to take out the Romans. He's going to lead a revolt. Is this the golden age now? Are you ready for the golden age? The Jews have always been about this, folks. About the fleshly salvation. And of course, there is no salvation of your body outside of Christ, and that's the point. This is from Shabbat, very famous Jewish site. What is Kabbalah? The soul of Judaism, according to Shabbat. Let's see, did I highlight something here? I must have. but it seems like it did not go through. So, 1 minute. And we are back. So, sometimes for some reason it removes these highlights, but here we go. This is by Tzvi Freeman, The Soul of Judaism. Inside your body breathes a person, a soul. Of course, right off the bat, you know that this is contrary to what the Bible teaches, because even the Israelites and Hebrews of the Bible were very different than the Jews of today, which have espoused a separate immortality of the soul, which is tied to Gnosticism and everything else. So, right off the first sentence, strike one. Inside the body of Jewish practice breathes an inner wisdom, the soul of Judaism. We often call it Kabbalah, meaning receiving. Just as Jewish practice is received through an unbroken ancient tradition from the revelation at Sinai, so is its soul. This is not true. This is not true, folks. This is a lie, absolute lie. What God gave to Moses and what the Jews do today is totally different, because if they listened to Moses, then they would have followed Christ. Anyway, Kabbalah then is the received wisdom, the native theology and cosmology of Judaism. Another name for Kabbalah, one much more revealing, is Torah Hatsod, commonly that is mistranslated as the secret teaching. The proper translation, however, contains the opposite meaning, the teachings of the secret, the teaching of the secret. The secret teaching means that we are trying to hide something from you. The teaching of the secret means that we are trying to teach something to you, to open up and reveal something hidden. Kabbalah is not secret teaching, it is the teaching of... Okay, that's a quote. Moving on. Now you might point out, if the secret is taught, it is no longer a secret. A revealed secret, it would seem, is an oxymoron. That would be so if we were discussing an artificial secret, one that is secret only because it is shrouded in secrecy, because others don't want you to find out. True secrets, even once taught, explained, illustrated, analyzed, and integrated into your consciousness, remain just as mysterious as before. No, vastly mysterious, for as the island of knowledge expands, so too its beach upon the infinite sea of the unknowable. Well, yes, in some sense I agree with you if the frame of perception here is Christ. Yeah, the more you study the Bible, the more you learn about Jesus, the more you learn about God. God is mysterious, absolutely. Of course, he's revealed himself. Jesus said, I've said nothing in secret. Very important. But still, there is the mystery of the incarnation, the mystery of the Trinity, the mystery of everything. There's a very mysterious thing you're dealing with. And it should only lead to more and more questions and mysteries and marveling. Absolutely. But this is introducing to you something else to marvel at that isn't in alignment with Christ. So it's, by definition, antichrist. It's false light. Moving on. Life teems with such mysteries. What is love? What is mind? What is life? What is existence? How do they come to be? From where do they emerge? What is your soul, the person within your body? You experience all these at every moment. They are you, and yet the more you gaze upon the depths of their mysteries, the deeper their waters become. Slither, slither. The deepest of all the secrets are those best known to all, that which we learn as small children, take for granted the rest of our lives, live with daily, and yet never manage to unravel or grasp with our cognitive mind. There is, things are, I exist, I am alive. Life is not death, darkness is not light, there is that which is bigger than me. Kabbalah plunges into these secrets and pulls their depths into the open. It provides metaphor, parable, understanding. It shines light and opens our eyes. Doesn't the devil say that when you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened and you will be like God? It inspires and guides us to use this wisdom for healing and growth in everyday life. This is why the experience of learning Kabbalah is one of, yes, I knew the truth all along. My heart knew, but my mouth was unable to speak it. The truths of the Kabbalah belong to every sentient being. So does the Kabbalah have an ecumenical, mystery religion of the ages manifesting in the world type of avenue? I think so. Yet most of all, Kabbalah provides a sense of the beyond, the knowledge of that which cannot be known, the wisdom of mystery, the understanding that we do not understand. Kabbalah is the knowledge of wonder. Well, Kabbalah is a false knowledge because the book of Proverbs is discussing wisdom, and wisdom is actually a picture of Jesus. Jesus is wisdom. If you don't, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and if you do not have God, the biblical God, in your life, then all the wisdom you're attaining is just false wisdom. Take it from me, I was very much into personal growth. I was very wise in the world's wisdom, folks. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm saying I was very deceived. I read all the books. I read all the personal growth gurus, all the philosophies. I was very wise in the world's wisdom, and it's meaningless because ultimately what it does is point you to yourself and to deceptions, whereas you should be pointed to Christ. And this is exactly what it does. But what's the point of reading this to you? Kabbalah is the soul of Judaism. So it's not just like this little sect of people. It's intricately tied to rabbinic Judaism. This is on Amazon. It's just a book. It's called The Essential Kabbalah, The Heart of Jewish Mysticism by Daniel C. Matt. Very popular book. But either way, you have a ton of these types of things. So what is the conclusion from these initial sources? Well, Kabbalah is the heart of rabbinic Judaism, of Jewish mysticism, really, but this mystery religion, which of course is Antichrist, very Antichrist. Kabbalah is central to the idea of a future physical redemption that is outside of Jesus. Therefore, it is Antichrist. Kabbalah is all about Gnosticism and pursuing esoteric knowledge in a way to advance yourself outside of Christ. Therefore, the God of the Kabbalah is not the God of the Bible. You are serving a different God. It's the God of this world. Anyone aligning with Kabbalistic teachings is either really deceived or they're part of the club, which of course many people are part of the club. The Kabbalah is a very ecumenical thing. There are secret societies that incorporate it. Hollywood stars, everybody's in the Kabbalah club in one way or another. Trump had a Kabbalah teacher. So these things are ecumenical in nature because the mystery religion of the ages is coming to the forefront. And part of the mystery religion is the Kabbalah. It's part of this esoteric Gnostic sect that has been since the dawn of time, since the temptation in the Garden of Eden. Now, a couple more things to look at. This is Magical Alphabet on Wikipedia. A magical alphabet or magical alphabet is a set of letters used primarily in occult magical practices and other esoteric traditions. These alphabets serve various purposes, including encoding secret messages, conducting rituals, creating amulets or talismans, keep this in mind, casting spells, invoking spiritual entities, and so on. Several magical alphabets, including the celestial alphabet, Malachim, and Transitus Fluvi, are based on the Hebrew alphabet, which itself has a long history of use in mystical and magical contexts. Did you know that? As ordered letter sets, magical alphabets are distinct from the various non-alphabetic, non-sequential magical scripts, which contain symbols representing entities, festivals, rituals, objects, or practices. Alchemical, astrological, astronomical objects or events, or other ideas rather than sounds. So, for example, like runes, if you know what that is, or sigils, which you'll see. You'll see plenty of those as well. Some alphabets, like runes, what we just said, may serve both purposes, thus acting as both alphabets and logographic or ideographic scripts according to their use at the time. So magical alphabets have certain characteristics or qualities that define them as a magical alphabet. They're used to convey secret knowledge, to conduct rituals, to create amulets or talismans, cast spells, invoke various entities, so on and so forth. We already know that several other magical alphabets like celestial alphabet, Malachim, Transitus Fluvi, and so on, they're based on the Hebrew, quote-unquote, Hebrew alphabet. You'll see people in the occult using the quote-unquote Hebrew alphabet. So it's very interesting. Here's one for all the gematria folks, the Bible Code. The Bible Code, also known as the Torah Code, is a purported set of encoded words within a Hebrew text of the Torah that, according to the proponents, has predicted significant historical events. The statistical likelihood of the Bible Code arising by chance has been thoroughly researched and is now widely considered to be statistically insignificant, as similar phenomenon can be observed in any sufficiently lengthy text. Although Bible codes have been postulated and studied for centuries, the subject has been popularized in modern times by Michael Drosden's book, The Bible Code, and the movie, The Omega Code, which, by the way, are very dispensationalist in their leaning. Some tests purportedly showing statistical significant codes in the Bible were published as a challenging puzzle in a peer-reviewed academic journal in 1994, which was pronounced solved in a subsequent 1999 paper published in the same journal. So basically, they thought they found some clever thing, but it was refuted because these things are very... So, for example, what is the Bible Code? Like if you see, here's the quote-unquote Hebrew, and if you space the letters out, equidistant spacing, you can find, oh, there's a code between these letters. And God wants you to sniff out these codes and create secret messages. Here's another example of ELS method. It's called the equidistant, what's the equidistant letter sequence. So you can type in, any kind of words, and you pick a distance. Like, okay, I'm going to do this particular distance and see if I have any codes on this page or that page. It's all statistics, folks. Ultimately, you can find these kind of codes in practically any text as long as it's long enough. Do you realize how long the Bible is? If you have the New Testament, it's like, 700,000 words. What are the odds that you're going to find such things on various pages and messages with the entire Bible at your disposal? Say, okay, every 3 words. No, that didn't work. Every 2 words. Oh, you see, there you go. Significant code. This is nonsense. History. The 13th century Spanish rabbi Bakia ben Asher, remember him from the Asher family of the Masoretes, that were not Karaite Jews. They were legalistic, mystical, kabbalistic Jews. This guy described an ELS in the Bible. So he's one of the first people to describe an equidistant letter spacing method. His 4-letter example related to the traditional 0 point of the Hebrew calendar, which is a fake calendar. Over the following centuries, there are hints that the ELS technique was known in Pardes Rimonim of the 16th century, Moshe Cordovero. So what's the point is that the people who did the Masoretic text were into gematria. There's proof for you. They aren't Karaite Jews. They are mystics. Criticism. The precise order of consonantal letters represented in the Hebrew Masoretic text is not consistent across manuscripts in any period. It is known from earlier versions, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, that the number of the letters was not constant, even in the 1st centuries AD. The Bible code theory does not seem to account for these variations. Yeah, again, what script are you using? Which particular manuscript? They're all different. So does that change the Bible code? I mean, come on. This is just legalism, and of course it's not just legalism, it's mysticism is what it is. This is gematria in Wikipedia. Gematria is the practice of assigning a numerical value to a name, word, or phrase by reading it as a number, or sometimes by using it as an alphanumerical cipher. The letters of the alphabets involved have standard numerical values, but a word can yield several values if a cipher is used. According to Aristotle, isopsephy, based on the Milesian numbering of the Greek alphabet developed in the Greek city of Miletus, was part of the Pythagorean tradition. Now, if you know a little bit of Pythagoras, he was an occultist, very much in the occult. I will be talking about him in my cosmology series, so make sure you stay tuned. We're going to be talking about the heliocentric conspiracy from the ancient times, how heliocentrism cannot be divorced from the occult. So you have to understand that whenever you see a Pythagorean anything, that means the occult. So this numbering of the letters and giving them certain meanings and stuff originated with the occultists in around the 6th century BC. I'm sure it was probably before that too. This is the mystery religion stuff, folks. But anyway, it's as old as time. The first evidence of the use of Hebrew letters as numbers dates back to when? 7,000 or 700 BC? 800 BC? No, 78 BC. Uh-oh. Well, that means that's well past Paleo-Hebrew. That proves to you that Paleo-Hebrew did not have such correlations of numbers to letters and meaning of numbers and so on. Gematria is still used in Jewish culture. Similar systems have been used in other languages and cultures derived from or inspired by either Greek isopsephy or Hebrew gematria, including Arabic numerals and English gematria, which of course all the people today are doing gematria too, thinking that they're uncovering prophecies, which is really silly. Here's a table of the various, I think these are, sample showing variants of Phoenician letters and numbers. Yeah, so Phoenicians were all about it too. And who knows to what extent the people are using it, but this has been a very developed thing over time, and today people are all about it because we're at the end. Moving on. The most common form of Hebrew gematria is used in the Talmud and Midrash, and elaborately by many post-Talmudic commentators. It involves reading words and sentences as numbers, and assigning numerical instead of phonetic value to each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. What does the Bible say? That God is not a God of confusion? And God, it says, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, I have said nothing in secret. Why would God need to say anything in secret? Think about it. Why would God need to say anything in secret? Why would he need to create all these fancy codes for you to determine what the real truth is when he's sovereign. God is sovereign. He just is. He expresses what he is, and it's perfect. He doesn't need to hide it behind secret knowledge and have you discern it. Of course, it's hidden from the reprobate, and the Spirit guides you to all truth, but nevertheless, you don't have to do all these esoteric calculations to find the truth of anything. When read as numbers, they can be compared and contrasted with other words or phrases. The Hebrew proverb, wine entered, secret went out, yada yada. The geometric value of wine is 70, and this is also geometric value of secret. Oh, there you go. Although a type of gematria system, Aru, was employed by the ancient Babylonian culture, do you understand where this comes from? Their writing script was logographic, and the numerical assignments they made were to whole words. Aru was very different from the Milesian systems used by the Greek and Hebrew cultures, which used alphabetic writing scripts. The value of the words with Aru were assigned in an entirely arbitrary manner, and correspondences were made through tables, and so cannot be considered a true form of gematria. Yeah, but we know where these things come from, folks. The mystery religion invaded the people of God through Babylonian captivity, through the Greek Hellenization. You always had the people of God right up and against the kingdom of darkness. This is a constant theme of history. And the kingdom of darkness is constantly trying to swallow the people of God. And of course, it doesn't. But the people who are counterfeits are swallowed, and history reveals that to you. Gematria sums can involve single words or a string of lengthy calculations. A short example of Hebrew numerology that uses gematria in the word chai, which is alive, which is composed of two letters that, using the assignments in the Mispar Gadol table shown below, add up to 18. This has made 18 a lucky number among the Jews. In early Jewish sources, the term can also refer to other forms of calculation or manipulation. For example, atbash, which is another type of calculating type of thing. But, you have basically, here's the letters, and then here's the numbers. And of course, who determines what the numbers are? That's another thing. You could totally scramble the numbers and do it differently. Who is the objective source that told you Aleph is 1, or it's 10, or it's 100, or whatever else, right? Who's the objective source that told you that? Because meaning comes from God. God is the one who tells you the meaning of everything, whether it's good or evil. God is the one who determines the meaning. He's the author. But God never gave you numerical values to letters and say, the Aleph is always, by default, I have created it this way, it's going to be 1. That's the numerical value of Aleph. No, there's no such thing in the Bible. That's oral tradition. It wasn't revealed in the Bible. It was, secretly given to Moses and handed out to the rabbis. And of course, only through the rabbis can you know such things. Moving on. This is now Shabbat. Also, here we go. This is also interesting from ShabbatMineEola.com. Hebrew alphabet in the Star of David. Did you know that? Of course, it's not the Star of David. It's the Star of Remphan. An amazing fact about the Jewish, if I can zoom out here, there we go. About the Jewish star. Even if you're not Jewish, this is really amazing. The Jewish Star of David, which is not the Star of David, is also referred to as the Magen David. All letters of the Hebrew alphabet are found in a Magen David or a Star of David. There is no such thing in any other language. I wonder why. Can you guess why? I think I can guess why. I can take a very educated guess. So here is the Star of Remphan, the occult 6-pointed star that's used for as above, so and below, male and female intersecting, sex magic, all kinds of occult things. And you can draw every Hebrew letter using the Star of David. Isn't that something? Huh. Boy, that's really interesting. That should at least raise an eyebrow if you understand what there is to understand. So, conclusion from these, modern Hebrew is engineered to be perfect for divination and sorcery. It's a magical alphabet. You will see more confirmation of this as we go on. It's intimately tied to Kabbalah magic because Kabbalists created the Masoretic alphabet. Remember, Ben Asher, with the Masoretes who put it together, he was doing gematria already in the 13th century, when they were 12th century. They were doing gematria probably long before that, since Babylon. You're going to see other things too that tie all these people to Kabbalah magic, and of course the Pharisees and the people who were from the Pharisee lineage, the scribes and the Masoretes, and the people from Rabbi Akiva's school who all he trained. All of this is from very long time ago, folks, and it's not divorceable from the occult and mysticism. You will see there is an exoteric meaning and an esoteric meaning, meaning there's a meaning that's given to you as the goyim. Oh, look, like that last site. Oh, you can have all the, what do you call it? All the letters in the Star of David. Now, somebody who, like a Christian Zionist, say, oh, clap, 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 clap. Amazing, amazing. This is proof the Jewish people are the chosen people of God, which, of course, they're completely ignorant. The Star of David is not the Star of David. It's an occult symbol. So the fact that the engineered alphabet that is made by the Pharisees, who are Kabbalists, fits into an occult symbol, and you can make the letters from an occult symbol of the entire alphabet, that tells you everything about what there is to know about this. So you can't divorce modern Hebrew from the occult. You just can't. You cannot divorce these two things. So now we're going to look at some other things that are very revealing. This is Sefer Raziel Hamalach. And it's a grimoire of practical Kabbalah from the Middle Ages, when written primarily in Hebrew and Aramaic. Liber Razielis Archangeli is 13th century Latin translation produced under Alfonso of Castile. This one survives. Here's page 44 of it, and you can see what's on here. Well, you've got Hebrew, quote-unquote Hebrew. By this point, it's already taken form in its Kabbalistic alphabet, and then you've got these runes. There's magical runes. There's the Star of quote-unquote David with various words and runes in there, and magic sigils all on one page to show you that these things belong together. Textual history. Like other obscure ancient texts such as the Bahir and the Sefer Yetzirah has been an extant, meaning existing text in a number of versions. The book cannot be shown to predate the 13th century, but many, in parts, date back to late antiquity insofar as its title is mentioned in other magical work of late antiquity, the Sword of Moses. So the point is, the actual work itself is from the 13th century, but the teachings and the principles go back much farther. The book claims to have been revealed to Adam by the angel Raziel. What does the Bible say about that? Critical historians regard it as a medieval work, most probably originating among the Ashkenazi Hasidim, if you know about them, as citations reliant on the main body content of the work as we receive it begin to appear only in the 12th century. At least one section was available to Ibn Ezra before 1153 when he finished the commentary to Exodus. The likely compiler of the medieval version is Eliezer of Worms, as Sefer Gali Razia, which developed into what we now have as Sefer Raziel, including more writings written by people of various theological opinions. According to Jacob Emden, it was compiled by Abraham Abulafia. So it's very much related to tree of knowledge, Kabbalistic type of things, but let's read a little bit about Adam and Abraham. According to Jewish traditions, the angel Raziel was sent to earth to teach Adam. Would God ever do such a thing? If you really know the God of the Bible, would God ever do such a thing? And due to the elevated soul of Abraham, Raziel returned to teach Abraham all the spiritual knowledge and spiritual laws. There you go. So Abraham got all the secret teachings that they're not in the Torah. Only the rabbis know him. And Shem passed down his priesthood to Abraham. So there you go. Jesus can't be the priest. As long as, you get to listen to the rabbis because they know the truth, right? Well, what does the Bible tell you about the rabbis and the Pharisees? It tells you they're sons of the devil. Hate to say it, but it's true. Raziel was sent to earth to teach Adam and Abraham the ways of nature. The book of Raziel explains everything from astrology to how the creative life energy starts with a thought from the spiritual realm prior to manifestation of speech and action in this physical world. Now, are we talking about biblical stuff? Or are we talking about New Age? There's nothing new under the sun, folks. New Age is Kabbalah. Kabbalah is ecumenical, and it's synergistic, and it's one world mystery religion type of thing, and it's going to get subsumed into the coming counterfeit Christian reality. Moving on. The eternal divine creative life energy of this earth is love. The book explains the spiritual laws of birth, death, and reincarnation of the soul. There you go. So, reincarnation, mystery religion, and many spiritual laws of change. So, are we in line with the Bible or not? Not one bit, not even 1%. This is completely mystery religion, Antichrist. But this is what influenced all those people making the Masoretic text. Let's see, what's the next one? This is from jewishmonsterhunting.com. Jewish magical amulets. Let's see. In last week's post about Adneha Sade, I talked briefly about necromancy, which is magic for speaking with the dead. The Torah is pretty clear. This is bad stuff. But the objection isn't a rationalist one. The Torah is absolutely clear that necromantic magic works. Jews are just supposed to keep away from it. No, the Torah is telling you basically that when you're doing necromancy, you're not talking to dead relatives. You're talking to demons and you're being deceived. Yeah, it works in the sense that you can commune with the spirit world, but you're not talking to dead relatives. You're not raising anybody from the dead. You are inviting demons to deceive you. That's why the Torah prohibits necromancy, because you're talking to demons. But today's Jews do not align with biblical views on death. They believe in a separate immortal soul, and so they're deceived by all these things, and it's all mystery religion stuff. No different than the Catholics, no different than Protestants in some ways. Moving on. There are other kinds of magic, though, that have thrived within the Jewish tradition. Did you know that? For the Jewish monster hunter, the place to start is with protective amulets. There you go. So the easy way to get involved in the occult with protective amulets. Amulets are written texts, sometimes cast or scribed in metal, but more typically written on parchment, that include one of God's names or one or more angel names or some permutation of these names, along with bits of psalms, prayers, halakhic or legal writings, and pleas for some specific form of assistance. Right now, there are a variety of amulets available from Jewish auction houses and from scribes around the world. What did Jesus say about the scribes? This week, for example, the latest auction catalog from the Kedem auction house in Jerusalem was released. Lot 6 from the catalog is a Birkat Kohanim amulet from 18th or 19th century Italy, which is intended for the protection from the evil eye and for a mother and her newborn. This is what it looks like. A little note from a rabbi that's blessed with Kabbalah magic, and it's got its little runes, and it's got, nice calligraphy, and it's designed to act as a magical amulet, meaning it's an object that has magical properties that is designed to create a magical effect. The Kedem auction house describes the amulet as follows. Amulets containing the verse of the Birkat Kohanim priestly blessing, quote, "May God bless you and protect you," and a 22-letter holy name derived from the verses of the Birkat Kohanim. This is legalism, folks. You don't need this stuff. If you have Jesus Christ, that's the best that you can have. What could you possibly need? If God is with us, who can be against us? Why do you need little magic amulets and superstitions to protect you? From what? And then really, it's just the demons deceiving you because they're playing a game behind the scenes. Oh, some demons are protecting you from other demons, or they're just playing together to make you feel that you are being protected. God is not going to endorse such things. God's not protecting you by doing magic amulets. So what are you appealing to? What spiritual force are you appealing to for protection when you're doing these things? You are appealing to the occult. But this is a real thing, so now you understand a different perspective to this. Here is a kabbalistic amulet from the Jewish Museum in London. And we can kind of zoom in. They do us a nice favor by giving this little zoom in. So you can see, here it is. Do you see what's going on here, folks? Look at this. Now you can look this up for yourself, or again, I'm going to put the references in the research section, in the resources section of the website, so you can access it for yourself if you're listening. But there's the Masoretic Hebrew. There's the 6-point. Let's go down a little bit. There's a 6-pointed star, and it's creating a little magical sigil with various characters and runes and perfect geometry, sacred geometry, and little sigils and words. This is an amulet, folks. Look at how the words are shaped into a menorah. Look at the little geometric drawings. This is magic. This is sorcery. This is divination. This is the occult. This is not at all what the people who wrote the Bible, the Hebrews and the Israelites, Moses would faint if he saw this. He would burn it. He would disavow it because this is occult. This is occult rituals. They're making rituals and shapes, and it's designed to create magic sigils. Hebrew is perfect for that. That's exactly what it was created for, and you're going to learn more and more about it. But that's a Kabbalistic amulet. So now remember, when it has the Leningrad Codex on the front, and on the front of the Masoretic text, it's got that giant 6-pointed star with all these little characters on it. Well, now you know what it is. It's a magical amulet. This is from the Medium. It's a Medium article by a man named Grant Isaac, Tarot, he's an occultist, but I wanted to show you what the point here is. In-depth explanation of the Hermetic kabbalistic system of the Rider-Waite tarot deck. So this is an article depicting, basically a very in-depth thing that they do with Kabbalah and the occult. So here you are, you've probably seen this if you've gotten any knowledge on secret societies with the dark and the light pillar, male and female, the various Kabbalah trays, and they don't show you the snake that goes up the Kabbalah, which is very interesting, because the snake's path, or the lightning bolt, which is another one, which is supposed to be an oscillating thing between, you're supposed to take these paths as an oscillation, right? Dark to light, dark to light, dark to light, and then pretty soon dark to light unite at the Kether, at the crown, and we're very close to that part in history, folks. The crown is about to come into the New Age mystery religion is going to manifest itself in the world as a one-world religio-political system. But we're not there yet. So there's a little dark to light going on. But either way, they don't show. Oh, here it is. Actually, they do show. You see this little path here at the bottom, and there's a sword. This is also represented by a lightning bolt. Of course, you know who that's associated with, and also by a snake that's crawling up this Kabbalah tree. So there you go. And there's the 7 chakra points that you can tie the Kabbalah thing to. There's the Hebrew name. And of course, they use God's name, Yod-He-Vav-He. And this is a very important point that people have used to discredit God's sacred name as, it's a cult. It's actually been changed by the Jews. Well, not so fast. There's a narrow road that you have to walk between these. But just take a notice of all this occult stuff and what the Hebrew alphabet, modern Hebrew, is associated with. The Yod is fire, the He is water, or actually Yod He Vav He. Yeah, which one is it? I forget. Yod is the little one. Yeah, Yod is fire, water, air, earth. You're going to learn also about the 4 worlds that the Kabbalists believe in. So they associate the various letters to elements. 4 worlds, of course, in the tarot, he's associating it to like coins, swords, cups, wands, whatever they're doing over here. But you can see all these little magical runes. So this is, even the occult love this stuff. If this was not an alphabet that was not a magical alphabet, then it would not be used for such things. But it is a magical alphabet. And so therefore, it is used by these things, by these very sources that are very occult. Here's 4 elements. This is from Aish, AISH.com. 4 elements, Jewish personality typing. Getting to know the most fascinating person in the world, yourself. No, I'm not the most fascinating person in the world. Jesus is the most fascinating person in the world, folks. If you think you are the most fascinating person in the world, then you are deceived, because we are desperately wicked. There's nothing fascinating. What's fascinating is being conformed to the image of Christ and seeing God work through your life and creating good things. But as far as me and what I do and my memories and the things that I've done, the mistakes, there's nothing fascinating. I have only mistakes and failures. Anyway, moving on. Rabbi Chaim Vital, a great Kabbalist who lived in Tzfat in the 15th century, writes that just as the world was created using the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water, which again is tied to the Kabbalah and the letters and so on, so too each person was created using those same elements. For each individual, one particular element is dominant, and this, to a large degree, determines your essential strengths and weaknesses. Identifying your element will help you reveal this area of spiritual development you need to do to achieve your own greatness. Does this have anything to do with the Bible? Christians are doing this stuff too. Oh, I'm a this on the personality chart. I'm a Enneagram. And of course, some of those things are interesting, like the psychology test, but some of them are occult, like the Enneagram. That's an occult thing. And people are doing it, not realizing that it's an occult thing. Putting it all together. As an assignment to gain clarity on this subject, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, in his book Ale Shur, suggests drawing out a character trait circle. And they give you instructions how you can draw your own little ritual circles and make your own little kind of divination practices to see, I'm a fire element, I'm a water element, I'm a so on and so forth. Rabbi Shalom Noach Berzovsky, in his Hasidic work Nezivos Shalom, says we are each created with a special mission to accomplish in this world. To figure out what this mission is, look at the upper part of your circle for the things that come easily to you, the talents you have and the things that you enjoy doing. So the rabbis are all about this New Age stuff, folks. When you're doing New Age, you are just practicing mystical Judaism. That's what you are. The Jews are laughing at all the Goyim who are thinking they're doing all this New Age stuff when really they're practicing Kabbalah magic. And Of course, to the Jews, you're a goyim and you don't even deserve to do that. And of course, you're going to burn because you'll be destroyed. But either way, you are practicing, you're giving power to these Antichrist things, not even realizing it and where they come from. This is from what? What is this from? This is from Wikipedia. This is Sefer Yetzirah. Oh, here's another good one. Origin. A cryptic story of the Babylonian Talmud states, on the eve of every Shabbat, Rav Hanina and Rav Hoshaya would sit and engage in the study of Sefer Yetzirah and create a delicious calf and eat it. This is very much part of the Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah. We're going to read a little bit more about it. Mystics assert that the biblical patriarch Abraham used the same method to create the calf prepared for the three angels who foretold Sarah's pregnancy in the biblical account of Genesis 18, verse 7. Does the Bible say anything about a special recipe that Abraham did, and now the rabbis know, and you got to prepare it a certain way? They love their laws and their legalism. It's truly profound. All the miraculous creations attributed to other rabbis of the Talmudic era are ascribed to by rabbinic commentators to the use of the same book. So very influential Kabbalistic book. Sefer Yetzirah Appendix 615 declares that Abraham was the recipient of the divine revelation of mystic lore, so that the rabbis of the classical rabbinic era and philosophers such as Shabbatai Dunolo and Judah Halevi never doubted that Abraham was the author of the book. So they think Abraham wrote it through the secret knowledge, and of course that's far from the truth. Abraham was justified by faith, and Abraham would look at these things and just roll his eyes. In Pardes Rimon, Moses ben Jacob Cordovero mentions a minority opinion that Rabbi Akiva authored it. There he is. And takes it to mean Abraham wrote it and Akiva redacted it to its current form. Jewish lore attributes it to Adam, and that from Adam it passed over to Noah and then to Abraham, and who was a friend of God. And of course, Shem was the one who passed down all these other traditions, and so there you go. Illegitimizing Christ when the Bible tells you that the truth, which is that you're justified by faith, that Shem died before Abraham, that Jesus is the only way to the Father, and so on and so forth. Traditions of men. In a manuscript in the British Museum, the Sefer Yetzirah is called the Hilkot Yetzirah and declared to be esoteric lore not accessible to anyone but the really pious. Academic dating. According to modern historians, the origin of the text is unknown and hotly debated. Some scholars believe it might have an early medieval origin, while others emphasize early traditions appearing in the book. Most contemporary scholars date the text authorship to the Talmudic period, right around the time they were developing their magical alphabet. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the essential elements of the book are characteristic to the 3rd or 4th century. Was that when they were doing their new translations of the Bible in Greek to try to subvert Christianity, and Rabbi Akiva had trained so many people, and they were going out into the world spreading various rumors and teachings about Shem and so on? Was that when that happened? I think so. So this is when it was probably written. So it's part of the conspiracy. For a work for this nature composed in the Geonic period could have been cast only in the form of Jewish gnosis, which remained stationary after the 4th century, if indeed it had not already become extinct. The historical origin of the Sefer Yetzirah was placed by Richard August Reitzenstein in the 2nd century BCE. According to Christopher Benton, the Hebrew grammatical form places its origin closer to the period of the Mishnah around the 2nd century. The division of the letters into the 3 classes of vowels, mutes, and sonants also appears in Hellenic texts. Very interesting little thing. Here's a page from the Sefer Yetzirah. Of course, it's got the magical alphabet all over it, and it's got the 2 pillars, if you know what that is, with the checkered floor. Nothing new under the sun, folks. You should recognize these things by now and understand that it's one giant mystery religion that has come to the forefront, and it will come to the forefront very soon. So, Sefer Yetzirah, we're going to have still a couple more things to read and to talk about, but conclusion from those last bit of articles. Well, the Kabbalah is very much intertwined to Judaism. You can't separate the two. It's part of the mystery religion of the ages, and it's going to be used on an ecumenical way to unite everybody. New Age is Kabbalah. Christians who believe in premillennialism with 1,000-year reign and in the 1,000-year periods with the 7,000 year, that's Kabbalah. The Jews and their Kabbalistic golden age, that aligns with everything else I've talked about. So ultimately, the Kabbalah is part of the mystery cult, and it's part of the mystery religion, which will come to the forefront through the Great Delusion, which the Great Delusion is people marveling after the beast. in a counterfeit golden age, which I've talked about quite a bit. But all these teachings are about obtaining divinity, godhood, eternal life, goodness, all the good things you could possibly imagine without Christ. That's what this is about. Does that remind you of anything? And it should right away of Genesis 3, where the devil basically promised Eve of all the good things, be like God. Of course, the Bible tells you you will be like God, but through Christ. You're being conformed. So the devil says, no, you can be like God without Christ. You can decide what's good and evil. You can be the sovereign. God isn't good. You can't trust him. Eat of the fruit and so on and so forth. So this is what it is. It's a forbidden fruit. Kabbalah was very much practiced by the rabbis since Babylon. Very clear. It was perfected over the centuries. And of course, by the time you had people like Isaac Luria in the 16th century, it was very much perfected and people have built on top of that. But it was going on before that. Remember, again, the cover of the Leningrad Codex is a giant magical amulet. So obviously, these principles and teachings and magic and sigils was going on long before, Isaac Luria was doing his thing, and it was very well in use. Rabbi Akiva was also very likely an early figure in creating the foundation for these beliefs, because again, if you remember how influential he was, and people have connected him to the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a very influential text of secret knowledge, very, very likely that he was part of these things. Remember also that Akiva mentored Aquila, who wrote Onkelos, that is blaspheming Jesus. And Aquila was a Christian originally, quote unquote, who converted to Judaism because he was caught dabbling in astrology. What does that tell you? That tells you that he was doing mysticism and he was caught, so he converted to Judaism. Why? Because they were doing mysticism there as well, and he could get along with everybody. And he was mentored by Akiva, so there you go. Akiva didn't care that you're doing astrology. So keep on doing it. Keep on doing this mystical stuff. We need to create this religion and, destroy Christianity. Modern Hebrew is not a normal alphabet, folks. It's not a normal alphabet that's designed to communicate simply sounds, okay? Normal alphabets are designed to communicate sounds and meanings, like by combining the sounds. They're not designed to create magical spells, magical sigils to be put in certain, arrangements, like, certain circles or squares and create magical amulets. This is a magical alphabet. You're now communing with the occult. You are opening yourself up to demons and you are willingly communing with the spirit world. That's the point. Modern Hebrew is not a normal alphabet. It's a magical alphabet. It's designed to basically be an extension of the Kabbalah. Just because they use the name of God, Yod He Vav He, the sounds, doesn't mean the Tetragrammaton is pagan or that it's evil. We're going to break this down in a future episode, fairly soon, probably at this time of this video in a couple of weeks, on the sacred name controversy. Because the sacred name is the sacred name. However, we don't really know how to pronounce the sacred name. Yahweh is an approximation. It could be something totally different, but it doesn't matter, and we're going to look into that. However, the modern Hebrew alphabet is not real Hebrew. So when they use these characters that are, to them represent God's name, they're not actually invoking the God of the Bible, folks. They're trying to be like God and invoke the power of God to basically create reality. Do you see what they're doing? So just because they're using that in a counterfeit way doesn't make the original revelation of that name evil or pagan or anything else. So that needs to be a discerning point. There's a narrow road there to walk with the sacred name, which we're going to be looking at. But God's name, you have to remember, was given to the Hebrews in Proto-Hebrew, in those symbols that we looked at in the beginning, the pictograms, that ultimately they point to Christ. Behold, hand behold, nail behold. Or hand behold, hook behold. Because the word for nail there is, I think, for hook. But either way, if you read it, hand behold, look, I'm human. Hook behold, or nail behold, look, I'm going to die for you. That is the name. That also means I am the self-existent one, which is so profound. It's so profound that those two things intersect. But you see, that's lost in modern Hebrew. You don't get that because modern Hebrew is not a pictogram. Modern Hebrew is a magical alphabet. So the original name was designed to point to Christ, that the person who's dying for you is also the one who is the self-existent one. And of course, once Jesus came around, there's no more need for the Hebrew alphabet. That thing went out of style. The Hebrews were the Jews were judged. Those things were done away with. Why? Because you have the person of Jesus. You don't need to guess as to the pronunciation. It's Jesus. Now, if you are in Spain or Mexico, you're going to say Jesus. If you're in, Africa with Swahili, you might say it a different way. If you're in India, you might say it a different way. You might say Isu or Isa. That doesn't mean you're calling on a false god. No, because God judges the heart. So these sacred name things are really legalism. It's something you need to avoid. And it's something also you need to understand the history of names and languages. But either way, we have the person of Jesus and we have the name, so we don't need to worry about the sacred name. I say Yahweh because that's what I am used to. I have come to believe that it's not Yehovah, and we're going to be looking at that. It's not Jehovah, that's for sure, because that's just a transliteration of a Jewish tradition, which again, if you look at the reformers, how they went with the Jewish tradition with the Masoretic text, then they also went with tradition with Jehovah. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a future thing. But the point is that Kabbalah is a magical alphabet, and it is inextricable from the occult and from mystical Judaism, from the rabbinic system, and from all of these occult activities. So we have a few more things to read because there's just so much of this stuff. Mishnaic Hebrew. Mishnaic Hebrew is the Hebrew language of the Talmudic texts. Here's what it looks like. So you can tell this is very different. Now we're starting to do with little squiggles, with dots. Got little crowns and points at the top. Very different alphabet. It's got a lot of nuance for some reason. Mishnaic Hebrew can be subdivided into Mishnaic Hebrew proper, also called Tannaitic Hebrew, early Rabbinic Hebrew, or Mishnaic Hebrew 1, which was a spoken language, and Amoraic Hebrew, also called late Rabbinic Hebrew, which is a literary language only. The Mishnaic Hebrew language, or early Rabbinic Hebrew language, is one of the direct ancient descendants of Biblical Hebrew, as preserved after the Babylonian captivity. Yeah, I mean, they had the sounds, but again, they had to restructure the alphabet, and they were taking things from Aramaic, and of course, at Babylon, they also discovered the kabbalistic principles and divination and things like that. So those things started very early on with the rabbinic system. And definitely recorded by the Jewish sages in the writing the Mishnah and other contemporary documents. This is a document I showed you from the 1st century, by the way, this one we looked at. So by the 1st century, this is Mishnaic Hebrew, started to look a little very different, and the Masoretic text comes from this tradition. This is a tradition, and it's been altered with certain things that are very important to understand. A transitional form of the language occurs in the other works of the Tannaitic literature, dating from the century beginning with the completion of the Mishnah. These include the halakhic midrashim. Halakhic has to do with the laws, and midrash are documents. So, and the expanded collection of the Mishnah-related material known as the Tosefta. The Talmud contains excerpts from these works, as well as further Tannaitic material not attested elsewhere. The generic term for these passages is baraitot. The language of all these works is very similar to Mishnaic Hebrew. Very, very interesting. Did I highlight anything else? No. But you can see there's the various letters, and by this point, they're already starting to look a little different. They have these little squiggles at the top, and it's like, are these things intentional, or are they just aesthetic? And of course, they're intentional. They're not just for the aesthetics, because remember, there's an exoteric, exo meaning outside. There's an exoteric meaning that you are given. And there's an esoteric meaning that the initiated, the rabbinic schools and the rabbis and the people under them are familiar with. This is the Aramaic alphabet. You can see what it looks like. Very different than Paleo-Hebrew, but it's got its own style. The ancient Aramaic alphabet was used to write Aramaic languages spoken by ancient Aramean pre-Christian tribes throughout the Fertile Crescent. It was also adopted by other peoples as their own alphabet when empires and their subjects underwent linguistic Aramization during the language shift for governing purposes, a precursor to Arabization centuries later, including among the Assyrians and Babylonians, who permanently replaced their Akkadian language and its cuneiform script with Aramaic and its script, and among the Jews, but not Samaritans, who adopted the Aramaic language as their vernacular and started using the Aramaic alphabet, which they call square script, even for writing Hebrew, displacing the former Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, And the modern Hebrew alphabet derives from the Aramaic alphabet in contrast to the modern Samaritan alphabet, which derives from Paleo-Hebrew. So Samaritan, if anything, is the closest to the original Hebrew, not modern Hebrew. But of course, the modern Jews are never going to tell you that. Let's see. Here's what it looks like. You can see it's got kind of some squarish feeling to it. They're all, very different in their own way, but you can see where it comes from. This is Aramaic inscription of Ataxila, Pakistan, probably around 200 BC. And you can see now we're starting to look a little more like Mishnaic Hebrew. Isn't that interesting? So this is where it comes from, folks. It's Aramaic. They took Aramaic, and if you can see, this is the alphabet, the letters. Here's Imperial Aramaic in these first two columns, Syriac script, and then there's Hebrew. Look, Aleph, Aleph, Bet, Bet. This is very similar. All they did is they took the squiggle and they kind of made it sideways. Gamal, they turned it sideways. Dalath, they just made the top part a little more straight. He is the same. Vav, say the same. Zain's the same. Heth, Teth, same. So basically this is just Aramaic, folks. It's Aramaic, but it's Aramaic with a twist. It's Aramaic with a twist, and that twist is very interesting, because there's a lot to discuss in that. This is now the Samaritan script. So keep all these in mind. We're just going to pin them, here and there. We'll put it all together and see the big picture. Samaritan Hebrew script, or simply Samaritan script, is used by the Samaritans for religious writings, including the Samaritan Pentateuch, writings in Samaritan Hebrew, and for commentaries and translations in Samaritan Aramaic and occasionally Arabic. This is what it looks like. So you can see it's very different. Very much more similar to, we looked at this before, but similar to Paleo-Hebrew. Samaritan is a direct descendant of the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, i.e. the original alphabet that the scriptures were written in, which was a variety of the Phoenician alphabet. Paleo-Hebrew is the alphabet in which large parts of the Hebrew Bible were originally penned, according to the consensus of most scholars, who also believe that these scripts are descendants of the Proto-Sinaitic script, which we talked about at the very beginning. Paleo-Hebrew script was used by the ancient Israelites, both Jews and Samaritans. But the Jews went along with the Aramaic and eventually developed the rabbinic system and so on and so forth. The better-known square script Hebrew alphabet, which has been traditionally used by the Jews since the Babylonian exile, ding, 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 is a stylized version of the Aramaic alphabet called Asherit. Although religious literalist interpretations of Exodus 32:16 assume that the text asserts that it was received on Sinai from the finger of God and that it has been continuous and unchanged since then. There you go. So the rabbis tell you that this has been a continuously unchanged, perfect alphabet from God himself, who basically made all these, you're going to see all these characteristics of the alphabet. So God gave them a alphabet that was designed to create magic sigils and invoke magic amulets and spells and so on. Would God do such a thing? I don't think so. I don't think so, my friends. And if you know the God of the Bible, you can see right through these things very, very quickly. All right, let's look at the Syriac alphabet. Syriac alphabet, now we start to see where some of these other features come from. The Syriac alphabet is a writing system primarily used, the Syriac language since the first century AD. It is one of the Semitic abjads descending from the Aramaic alphabet through the Palmyrene alphabet. And it shares similarities with Phoenician, Hebrew, Arabic, and Sogdian, the precursor and indirect ancestor of the traditional Mongolian scripts. Syriac, Mongolian, I've never seen Mongolian. That's kind of interesting. Huh. They write vertically. That's cool. I've never seen Mongolian script before. Syriac is written from right to left in horizontal lines. It is a cursive script where most but not all letters connect with a word. There is no letter case distinction between upper and lowercase letters, though some letters change their form depending on their position within a word. Spaces separate individual words. So you can see what this looks like, and it's got, it looks like Arabic kind of. You can see where the relationship would be. But it's also got all these little dots and squiggles, which is very important, which will help to understand why Hebrew, modern Hebrew, is the way it is. Vowels. The Eastern script uses a system of dots above and or below letters based on an older system to indicate vowel sounds not found in the script. It tells you 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dots, 4 dots, 2 dots up, 2 dots down, all these different systems. It is thought that the Eastern method for representing vowels influenced the development of the Nikud markings used for writing Hebrew. Well, I wonder what Nikud are. Let's see. In Hebrew orthography, now remember, Hebrew, when we say Hebrew here, it's like saying Christian today. Don't think Hebrew like Moses, okay, or Abraham. We're talking Hebrew like counterfeit Hebrew. In Hebrew orthography, Nikud or Nikud, yada, 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 is a system of diacritical signs used to represent vowels or distinguish between alternative pronunciation of letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Several such diacritical systems were developed in the early Middle Ages. The most widespread system, and the only one still used to a significant degree today, was created by the Masoretes in the second half of the first millennium AD. In the land of Israel, the text written with Nikud is called Ketiv Menukad. So here's what it looks like. You can see these little red dots are, basically telling you how to pronounce the words. But the question is, how do you really know how to pronounce these words when all of those pronunciations were never really written down? In Paleo-Hebrew, it was just consonants. That's why the sacred name, we don't know how to pronounce it. We know the consonants, Yod, He, Vav, He, but we don't know how to pronounce it. Could be Yohuvu, Yohuvah, Yehovah, Yahuwah. I mean, there's so many different ways to pronounce it because there's many vowels. So you're taking the people who rejected Christ, you're taking their word that this is how you pronounce certain things in Hebrew. That's why even when you read the Hebrew, it's like you really don't have any guarantee that what you're pronouncing is actually what the people who wrote the Bible pronounced. Do you understand? Because you're going off of Masoretic Hebrew of how they're telling you to pronounce the words. But these things are, you can see, for example, here, they have these little dots underneath, this little clear symbol. Tells you their rules, and of course they have so many rules and regulations, and all these things have esoteric meanings, folks. They're again, exoteric. Oh, they're for the vowels, they're for this, but then there are other esoteric meanings as well, as you will soon learn. Hebrew cantillation. Hebrew cantillation, trop, trop, te'amim, is the manner of chanting ritual readings from the Hebrew Bible in synagogue services. The chants are written and notated in accordance with the special signs or marks printed in the Masoretic text to complement the letters and the vowel points. So you have to have certain ways that you chant and pronounce these things, otherwise won't get the effect. These marks are known in English as accents, diacritics, notes, or trope symbols in Hebrew as te'amei hamikra, whatever. Some of these signs were also sometimes used in medieval manuscripts of the Mishnah. Must be that they were working on this idea for a while. The musical motifs associated with the signs are known in Hebrew as nigun or neginot, not to be confused with Hasidic nigun, and in Yiddish as a trop. The word trope is sometimes used in Jewish English with the same meaning. So there's basically this entire system that they've developed. We're going to read about it because where does it come from? Well, it comes from Babylonian, Jerusalem, and Tiberian system. And of course, these two first ones are gone, and the Tiberian system is the one that survived. By the 10th century, the chant in use in medieval Palestine had clearly become more complex, both because of the existence of Pazir, Geresh, and Telisha motifs in longer verses, and because the realization of a phrase ending with a given type of break varied according to the number of words and syllables in the phrase. The Tiberian Masoretes therefore developed a comprehensive notation with a symbol on each word to replace the fragmentary systems previously in use. In particular, it was necessary to invent a range of different conjunctive accents to show how to introduce and elaborate the main motif in the longer phrases. So the Masoretes told you how to pronounce these words, but the Masoretes were mystics, and they were into the Kabbalah. They're in the tradition of the Pharisees like Rabbi Akiva, who are very antichrist. So there's that. The system they devised is one in use today and is found in biblical manuscripts such as the Aleppo Codex. See if that has a picture. Yeah, you can see all these little markings. Very interesting. A Masoretic treatise called Dikuki Hate Amim, probably pronounced that wrong, but Precise Rules of the Accents by Aaron ben Moses Asher survives, though both the names and the classification of the accents differ somewhat from those of the present day. So there you go. Even now, the old records of the Asher pronunciation guides are also different. So nobody knows left from right with this because it's what? It's traditions of men. If God had intended to preserve original Paleo-Hebrew, then he would have preserved it. But he didn't, because the gospel was supposed to go to the Gentiles. Do you get it? And now the gospel is in all kinds of languages, especially English. English has dominated the world. It's become the language of business. But anyway, there's that. So you have these cantillation marks and pronunciation marks. Now we get into a little more interesting things here. This is the tag. Tag in Hebrew writing. A tag is a decoration drawn over some Hebrew letters in the Jewish scrolls of Sifrei Kodesh, Tefillin, and Metzuzot. The Hebrew name for this scribal feature is kether. Tag and kether mean crown, and in Aramaic and Hebrew respectively. So here's what it looks like. 3 tagin on the letter Gimel. So here's 3 little things. Here's another one, 3 tagin on the letter Ain, and they got these little crowns. It's like, why? What's the purpose of these things? Sefer Tagin. About the 2nd century CE, a work called Sefer Tagin emerged, attributed to none other than Rabbi Akiva. Are you starting to see a common thread? Which laid out the 960 places where modified tagin or letter forms occur in a Torah scroll. In it, the locations of letters which received a number of tagin, which differs from the Shatnez God's tradition, i.e. the initial Beit of Bereshit in Genesis 1, having 4 tagin as opposed to the usual 1, and the instances of the Aleph, which bear 7 tagin apiece. So, rules of men, traditions of men. According to this work, each occurrence of each letter is to be written with between 0 and 7 tagin, as delineated in the lists contained therein. So Rabbi Akiva, who was very influential in a lot of different things, we see yet another evidence, as you'll soon see even more, that he was involved with the mystical and the occult, with this whole tagin. He wrote an entire treatise on how to appropriate these tags so that you could discern secret knowledge. Interpretation. The Talmud states that the tagin were originally added to the text by God on Mount Sinai. Yeah, right. And that Rabbi Akiva would use their presence in order to derive laws. In Kabbalistic thought, each tag has a special significance and meaning. What did I tell you about exoteric and esoteric? To you as the Goyim cattle who looks at the alphabet, oh, that's cute, that's a really cool little decoration. To the initiated, that has a very esoteric meaning. And of course, this is wrong about God putting tags on letters because we know that the scripts were written in Paleo-Hebrew. The Paleo-Hebrew did not have tags or dots for vowels and all these things. It was pictographic, and people knew how to pronounce things based on, speaking. So, of course, that system is not at all what they're talking about. They're saying that basically God was writing this perfect Kabbalistic Hebrew and gave it to Moses. And, of course, that's just nonsense. That it's not even supported by historical evidence. Couple more here, 2 more. This is the 4 worlds concept. Of course, I've seen this in Christian ideas too and thinking, but this is a Kabbalistic concept. Sometimes counted with a prior stage to make 5 worlds are the comprehensive categories of spiritual realms in Kabbalah and the descending chain of existence. The worlds are formed by the Or Mimale Kol Amim, literally fills all worlds, which is the divine creative light that represents the concept of divine immanence. Does that sound like we're talking about God or the enemy that appears as an angel of light and that emanates light? The 10 Sephirot attributes and their associative 12 partsufim shine in each world, as do more specific divine manifestations. The Lurianic Kabbalah, the partsufim dynamically interact with each other and sublime levels are enclosed within lower existences, representing a sort of concealed soul. Nonetheless, in each world, particular Sephirot and partsufim dominate. The 5 worlds are in descending order: Adam Karatmon, the primordial man, the world of emanation. Of course, the occult is all about emanations, and New Age is all about emanations. The world of creation, the world of formation, and the world of action. And of course, all these things are used by them to create these occult mystery beliefs, and they associate these things, unfortunately, to each letter of God's name. They say correspondence. You see, the letter of the Tetragrammaton. The Yod is representation of this crown one. It's the letter of the primordial man. And this other one is a letter of the, Atzilut, the emanation or nearness. And so, of course, the pronunciation of these letters, we don't know how they're pronounced, but we know the consonants. But these are artificial consonants. They're counterfeit. Do you understand? God did not give them this system. They are taking the name of God, blaspheming it actually, by using it for all these occult things and to be like God. This is like blasphemy on the highest level. So this is what's happening with the whole sacred name thing. Not the sacred name, people who insist on Yeshua, but these people who, like the Jews who are doing kabbalistic stuff with the tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton is not evil, folks. The tetragrammaton just simply refers to the 4 letters that God gave his name, his sacred name to Moses. I am the one who is. I am the being one. That in Paleo-Hebrew points to Christ. Of course, Paleo-Hebrew is not around anymore, but they took the consonants and they made their own alphabet out of it so they can invoke the power of God and create basically their own little magical world. Okay, one more. This is a good one. This is also from Aish, A-I-S-H, a lot of Jewish resources here, by Rabbi David Rosenfeld. Crowns on Torah's letters. Let's read what Rabbi Rosenfeld has to say. This is recent, from 2024. Question. I've read that some of the Hebrew letters have crowns drawn on top of them when they're written in the Torah. Which letters does this apply to? What do they look like, and what is the purpose of the crowns? The Aish Rabbi replies, thank you for raising the interesting issue. As you wrote, some of the letters, when written in the Torah, have tiny lines, rounded at the top, protruding from the tops of them. These lines look a bit like a crown and are accordingly called tagin in Hebrew, which we looked at. The letters which contain crowns made of 3 lines are, they give you the letters. The Talmud notes that these letters spell the words shatnez guts, which is why I presented them out of alphabetical order. I.e., this is an anagram, which is also an occult practice. To re-scramble the letters and say, oh, you see? Kind of like how NASA says T minus. Well, T minus what? If you add the T, then you have Nasat, and you have an anagram for Satan. So this is occult numerological type of stuff, folks. But anyway, the letters which have crowns of a single line are, and they give you these ones, and these spelled Bedek Shaya. These crowns appear to be more decorations, exoteric, but according to the Talmud, they have deep esoteric meanings. A rabbi is telling you this, folks. The Talmud relates that when Moses ascended to heaven to receive the Torah, which that did not happen, he went on the mountain and he spoke with God. He got the 10 Commandments, but he did not ascend to heaven. Jesus tells you that no man has ascended to heaven in John 3. Moving on, let's see what rabbinic tradition tells us. He found God tying crowns onto the tops of the letters. Moses asked what they were for, and God told him that in a future generation, a great sage named Akiva, son of Yosef, i.e. Rabbi Akiva, will derive mounds upon mounds of laws from every little mark on the Torah. There you go. They love their laws, man. They just love their laws. Nothing new under the sun. Pharisees from day one. Thus, amazingly, the message of the Torah's crowns is so deep that Moses himself didn't know what it is. That's right, Moses, the one who was on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights without food or water, who came down and had a glowing face because he was literally in the presence of God, who God said that he talks as a friend, mouth to mouth, as in, face to face, and not like a prophet, so is something higher than a prophet. That Moses had no clue what's going on with this. You needed a better sage. You needed somebody who was brilliant, i.e., Rabbi Akiva. He's even greater than Moses, basically is what they're saying. Moving on. This was left for the greatest scholar of a later generation to uncover. Some explain that the crowns represent a level of understanding higher and more mystical than the Torah itself. And thus the crowns sit atop the Torah's letters. Do you understand? Like when they have the monument to George Washington in, is it Massachusetts? I think it's Massachusetts. Maybe I'm wrong, but somewhere in there on the East Coast. What does it say? Nice bust of George Washington. Freemason and first president. Well, which one of those comes first in your mind? Because why? Because everything in this world is vertical. If you understand the cosmology of this world, which of course right now we have the cosmology series, so make sure you check it out. Everything in this world is created as a vertical gradient. Why? Because God is at the top, so that you understand that what is above you has authority. So when you see Freemason and first president, the thing that is written above is the thing that has more authority. Therefore, Freemason is the one that takes priority. George Washington was an occultist and Freemason before he was a president. And so goes the case with most of the U.S. presidents. But that's kind of an aside. What's the point? The point is, well, the crowns sit on top of the Torah letters, meaning there's the word that God gave you. There's the knowledge there, but really there's secret knowledge on top of that knowledge that's even more mysterious and mystical than the words that God gave you. That is extremely blasphemous and antichrist. That's saying that you don't believe that God is sovereign and that there's knowledge that's even better that you can discern than what God has already given you very plainly. It's blasphemous, really, but this is teachings of men, folks. When I read to you those passages of the rebukes to the Pharisees that Jesus said, they're very accurate, and they're still accurate. One more paragraph here. The Torah commentator of Or Chaim explains that although the entire Torah was given to Moses at Sinai, including its every law, Moses wasn't always told how each law may be seen in the text of the Torah itself. Many of the laws were simply given to Moses orally without source as part of the oral Torah, which of course is not true. Rabbi Akiva, however, was able to discern using the Torah's crowns, i.e. mystical things, how every single law could actually be derived from the Torah itself. Imagine. Thus, although Rabbi Akiva did not invent any new laws not known to Moses, he was able to connect the oral Torah to the written in a matter Moses himself was not aware of. So all of these are traditions of men designed to subvert the word of God and introduce the traditions and the word of man. In this case, Rabbi Akiva, which I told you would hear about quite a bit as we go through this because there is just so much that he's influenced. Now, you have several points of evidence that tie Rabbi Akiva to occultism and mystery school. You have the fact that he tied the crowns, and of course there's deep esoteric meaning to them, even more profound than the Torah. You have the Sefer Yetzirah that he wrote. You have all these gematria things, all the things we looked at before. So very obvious that even by Rabbi Akiva's day, the Jews were very much into the occult and Kabbalah and mystical religion and doing all these types of things. So what do we take from this? Well, there's a lot to take in. Take a deep breath. We're going to take it one step at a time and put this together. Remember that the evolution of language is very complex. And what I've gone through with you is just a cursory review. You could spend an entire college education going years and years to school studying, old languages. That's not what this is about, although that would be interesting, I assume, because there's, linguistics and the evolution of language is a very interesting topic. There's more that goes into this than meets the eye, which is what you're looking at is a history of tampering and also a pervasive conspiracy to bring the occult to the forefront. On one side, so how do we walk the narrow road with this? Because some of the stuff on Wikipedia is very tame, let's put it that way. But you can discern. You can discern from what I've shown you what the truth is. And the narrow road is this, folks. On one side, you have the academic explanation of the evolution of languages, which tells you what? Well, it tells you the Jews had historical and political upheavals that forced them into other alphabets. Paleo-Hebrew went out. They got conquered by, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans. So they adopted the Aramaic alphabet, and that influenced their writing style because they needed a way to pronounce their words, to have their religious practices going on, and to communicate the scriptures and so on. So they took Aramaic, they took Syriac alphabets, they took other things from there, and they added things like dots and things to basically have a Mishnaic Hebrew, which was, in the early part of after 70 AD, and then eventually Masoretic Hebrew, which is what they use today. So there is a necessity to create an alphabet that would convey the pronunciations because they've been dispersed so many times. So you need to understand how to pronounce these words because the vowels weren't baked into original Hebrew. So there is valid argument to say that, yeah, they needed an alphabet. They needed something, and they adopted it from Aramaic. That's very clear. Mishnaic Hebrew and Masoretic Hebrew are just Aramaic with crowns and squiggles and all this magical stuff added. So there's legitimate argument that they needed an alphabet. However, the other side, which is not easy to research, and again, you could go down this rabbit hole with all the things I've shown you, check the resources for yourself, but there's more to the story, and hopefully that's obvious. Rabbi Akiva, who was a mystic, was instrumental in the developing of Kabbalah and mystical ideas and the halakhic principles and all the laws and regulations. Basically, rabbinic Judaism is tied to all of these things. And they revere him as this basically, superhero, even better than Moses. The Ben Asher family, who were not Karaite Jews, i.e. they didn't see the Tanakh as the only authoritative word of God. They were mystics. They were into, gematria, which we documented. They were very influential in creating the Masoretic text. And they were associated with Kabbalah and mysticism. And of course, the Leningrad Codex has a magic amulet over it. That's very clear. You have other figures like Isaac Luria, who's associated with Kabbalah. He's the father of modern Kabbalah, secret knowledge, using divination like gematria and things like that. All these things go back way over. They're superimposed on the history of this alphabet being developed. The Jews have used it for magic sigils, magic amulets for centuries. That's an openly documented thing. According to their traditions, actually, the amulets don't work unless you get the crowns right. You see, so there's a deep esoteric meaning to these things, not just decoration. Then, of course, the Kabbalists have their own interpretation of the scriptures, which is, you can clearly see, for them, the interpretation, which is the crowns, tells you how to derive the interpretation, and that's on top of the Word of God. Do you get the point? So who has superiority? Well, it's the Kabbalistic interpretation. Because, there's the default, but then there's the real knowledge that you need to learn, which is the secret knowledge. So what's the point? Well, modern Hebrew, despite the necessity for the Jews to develop an alphabet with all of the political things going on, despite that, it is impossible to divorce modern Hebrew from the occult and mysticism. You can't. Mysticism is programmed into the alphabet, and hopefully you see that. What is definitely true and obvious that we can document, and we have documented, are the following. Modern Hebrew script is taken from Aramaic and also influenced by Syriac with all the points and squiggles to denote vowels. Modern Hebrew uses dots, dashes, crowns, and various decorations, right, that were never part of the original Hebrew alphabet, the Paleo-Hebrew, which you can see in the Samaritan script, which, of course, Samaritan has evolved a little bit too, but Paleo-Hebrew is very different. Because Paleo-Hebrew, original Hebrew, actual Hebrew, was not a mystical language, folks. It was not a mystical alphabet. It wasn't designed to be arranged in shapes and create magical amulets. Are you kidding me? God would never give them that alphabet. God would never let them do that. And of course, they were rebuked and judged for those kind of things, because the Canaanites probably did those types of things. And each aspect of the various Kabbalah, like the dots, the marks, the crowns, these things are also tied to different things like the elements, the various worlds that I read you, the 4 worlds or the 5 worlds. What's the point? Well, the point is that when they're using these letters and they're doing them in the right way, and that's why the magic amulets for them in their minds work, is because they're using the magic of the Kabbalah through the 4 worlds and through manifesting these various things and programming. In their mind, they're programming reality. That's what they're doing by physically doing things in the world, which of course is a lie. You are not going to do those types of things. God is not going to let you alter reality. Now, of course, there are some things that God allows, right? The enemy has been able to counterfeit certain miracles, and God has allowed that to prove his sovereignty over them once he destroys them. But the fundamental belief behind Kabbalah is that you can be like God, that you can do certain things, and you can create your own reality and manifest your world and so on and so forth. So it's also associated to the 4 elements. You saw that with the fire, water, wind, and earth, the tarot cards, the people who are in the occult, witches, warlocks, they love this kind of stuff. They love the tetragrammaton. And of course, they love it not because it's the name of God, but because they can be like God in their mind and invoke the power of God. But of course, they're not invoking the power of God at all. God would never allow such a thing. But demons can masquerade as angels of light and give people certain results and effects and deceive them into thinking that they are invoking the power of God. Numbers also weren't part of the original Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew, meaning numbers and letters didn't have number equivalents that you could just add up and create alternative meanings, right? So they didn't have number equivalents, and numbers didn't have meanings to them. Okay, this is gematria. This was not part of original Hebrew. That comes from Babylon, numerology, and so on. Remember, the Babylonians were rebuked for these kind of things. History pinpoints that this happened in the 1st century BC, where you had influence of when I say this, I mean gematria. Gematria, the first earliest recorded use was like 78 BC, which is right around the time when the Greeks were Hellenizing the Jews and the Romans. Of course, the Romans had taken over by that point, but either way, the Romans were doing things like that too. Look, everybody was pagan and under the mystery religion. And so numerology, gematria, it all comes from Babylon. It's all dated back there. It doesn't come from the 700s BC or 800s BC because Paleo-Hebrew had no reason to do that. So these things are very easy to isolate. And of course, today people are using gematria. Of course, the 17th letter of the alphabet and Trump and all these things and say, look, if you do this in the gematria calculator, it says this and this. Like, do you realize you are playing into the kabbalistic rabbinical system when you're doing these types of things? And listen, anybody who's, even with the King James only stuff, folks, look, you need to abandon this King James only stuff. And if you're going to insist on it, then you need to think of better and more clever arguments than, well, look, the King James only says this, this, and this adds up to this, and it's 7 times the word of God and this and that. Like, you cannot use numerology as the basis for why something should be inspired or legitimate. That's nonsense. You're basically aligning with Talmudic tradition. Christians never did such things, nor did God expect you to do such things to validate his word. You validate his word because it's the truth. And you read it and you understand it and you see that it's true. It is true that you cannot be made right with God, who is a perfect judge, unless you pay. So that's the bad news, folks. The gospel gives you the good news, which is that Jesus paid for your sins and he's perfect, he's sinless, and he's also God, which makes sense because now God's name could be vindicated as a perfect judge, and he can prove his righteousness through the crucifixion of Christ, while also giving you a way to have a payment for your sins. That makes sense. It's true. It's true if you understand who God is. So you don't need to do all these numerological divinations and things. He's given you prophecy. You interpret it according to the Bible. You use a consistent hermeneutic, which in this case is historicism. I can go from Daniel 2 all the way to Revelation 17, no problem. Very consistent hermeneutic without deviating. Dispensationalists, preterists, futurists, Jewish-focused, end times event, none of those use a consistent hermeneutic. So you don't need gematria. You don't need all these numerological things. You need to just learn how to read the Bible. All of it is there. The point is that modern Hebrew not only fulfills the standards of a magical alphabet, which we looked at earlier, it is expressly used for magic. Do you understand? The people who are the initiates, or I should say like the people who are on the inside, like that rabbi, they know what's up. You may be reading and say, oh, look, it's Hebrew, or, you listen to somebody teaching from a Hebrew and say this and that. The people who are on the inside know the real meaning of these letters. They are expressly used and created for magical purposes. Rabbis pass down secret invocation knowledge through certain pronunciations and how you should sing a certain word to manifest a certain reality. Like all those magical amulets, they're magical amulets because they're pronounced in a certain way. Do you understand? They're vocalizing their little magic, Kabbalah magic through these amulets. And those are magical spells that they're casting and chanting. The initiates know what the secret meanings of words and the crowns and the vocalizations are, but the people who are on the outside don't. Modern Hebrew is not real Hebrew. It's a rabbinic Pharisee magical alphabet. It's used for Antichrist-related mystical activities. Combined with the changes that they made to the scriptures, which we've been documenting in this entire message, it's designed ultimately to attack Christ and to invoke their false golden age, false worldly salvation, an eternal life without Christ. That's what they're trying to do with this magic alphabet. That is the purpose of the Masoretic conspiracy, the Masoretic Psyop. You don't have to know everything, folks. You don't have to be a linguistics expert. You don't have to be an ancient Near East history expert. You don't even need to be a Bible expert. Hopefully you see the truth with everything I've presented to you. You don't need to be well-read in all these things. You just need to see patterns. See the patterns. This is why also there's a lot of misinformation about God's Old Testament name. Again, Yod-He-Vav-He, W-H-Y-H in English. Some have pointed out, for example, that Crowley, people who do Kabbalah, tarot, witchcraft, all these people use the tetragrammaton. There you go. So it must be an evil thing. And some even people go so far as saying, see, Yahweh was an evil God, like the Gnostics believe, which is just such nonsense. That's why I want to make a whole video, another presentation on the sacred name controversy, because that's nonsense. It doesn't follow. Just because the Jews have created their own magical alphabet and are counterfeiting the name of God and trying to invoke it through rituals doesn't mean that Yahweh, the name, the sacred name, is evil, or that Yahweh in the Old Testament was another God than Jesus. Not at all. This is nonsense. People don't realize that Masoretic Hebrew is fake. It's a fake occult alphabet. It's not real Hebrew. There's no tradition of this. It hasn't stayed the same since Moses. The way the rabbis make it seem is they see this was given to Moses and through the oral tradition, and that was just kept alongside everything else. Whereas the evidence tells you clearly that this was actually created by the rabbis, especially after the 70 AD, where the temple got destroyed. So they needed to solidify their religion. And of course, they solidified it with the occult and everything else, because Judaism is a rebellion to the scriptures. It's not in alignment with the scriptures. Anyway, God's name was not written in Masoretic Hebrew. That's something you need to realize. So they're just trying to invoke God's power without actually coming to God in repentance. Because if you come to God in repentance and he gives you a new heart, then yeah, the power of God will be invoked in your life, not because of what you're doing. Being born again is like the wind. You don't know where it comes from or where it goes, but the power of God will be in your life through Jesus Christ. But they're trying to invoke the power of God outside of Jesus Christ, which of course is going to fail. The best it's going to do is going to attract demons to deceive them, to give them some results, but of course deceive them into their own destruction. More on this in a future episode on the sacred name, but the point from all this is this, folks. You need to realize that the Masoretic text is not the best text for the Old Testament. It's not. Very clearly so, for multiple reasons. Therefore, big point, KJV onlyists, you are categorically wrong about your position. The KJV only movement is a psyop, and I will have a whole presentation on that in the near future. The KJV only psyop. But today was very important because we had to lay the groundwork for all these other future videos. I want you also to realize that the Jews are not God's chosen people. They're not this people that God has chosen, and they have this unbroken genealogy and an ancient alphabet from, as if God himself came down and wrote the crowns and all these different things. No, that's false. That's a false history, because the modern Jews are imposters. And again, that may ruffle some feathers, but this is the truth, folks. Most of the Jews today are not related to the 12 tribes of Israel because of the Edomite conversion, the countless intermarrying between the Israelites. Even when they left the Exodus, it was a mixed multitude. Then you had the Khazar conversion. Then you had the Templar invasion. You had so many things that create that now to be a Jew. Like, what does it mean to be a Jew today? It doesn't mean anything. So there's that. Of course, Judaism also is very different than the Hebrew scriptures. It's a rebellion. So what do you have in common? So they're imposters. And modern Hebrew is an imposter alphabet. It's not Hebrew. It's Masoretic Kabbalah engineered language designed to cast spells, create sigils, create amulets, create magical effects. So don't be deceived. Don't think it's the original. Don't give credit to people saying, oh, it's some broken tradition from Moses. What are you talking about? The evidence shows us very clearly how the alphabets changed and who changed them and for what purpose. I want you to realize that gematria and secret knowledge are from the devil, not from God. So do not use them. Do not listen to people that use them. Do not use them as in any sense or form to justify what you believe. Oh, look, the King James only has this number of times where it says the Holy Spirit says 777. Like, don't use those kind of arguments, folks. That's not the kind of argument that you need to build your faith on. That's weak. And of course, it's wrong because it's gematria. Also realize that many end times views are based on a false kabbalistic timeline of the 6,000 years, which is designed to discredit Christ and give a false Christ or a false Messiah an open window. And most of the world believes this, unfortunately. And realize that modern creationism is also based on a false timeline. People like Answers in Genesis are sorely mistaken because they use the Masoretic text and they give power to the false timeline. So, point of the story, always do your homework. Have multiple resources, and base your beliefs on evidence, folks. Weigh pro and against. Try to find the narrow road, and walk it consistently. That's the point. Now, we have one more part in this before the epilogue, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I want to talk about that a little bit because there's some very interesting things to talk about with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So onward to part 10.